My name is David, and I'd used to work at Bojangles, the most prestigious restaurant in town. It was a place of class, opulence, and secrets that festered in the dimly lit corners. I had been a server there for 5 years, and I'd seen my fair share of strange things, but nothing could have prepared me for the chilling events that would unfold on a fateful winter night. Bojangles had a reputation for exquisite cuisine and impeccable service, but there was something else that lingered beneath the veneer of sophistication. It was a sense of impending doom that clung to the air like a heavy fog. The restaurant was a grand old building with ornate chandeliers, crimson velvet curtains, and a maze of narrow hallways that led to private dining rooms. These rooms had housed powerful politicians, wealthy tycoons, and even the occasional celebrity. But it was the room at the far end of the restaurant that everyone whispered about, the room they called the chamber. The chamber was reserved for the most exclusive of guests, those who could afford to pay exorbitant prices for a meal that promised to be like no other. It was a small, dimly lit space with a single long table and 13 chairs. The walls were adorned with dark paintings of grotesque figures, and the centerpiece of the room was a massive, ancient mirror that covered one entire wall. Rumor had it that the mirror held the souls of those who had dined in the chamber, forever trapped in its eerie reflection. On that cold winter night, I received a call from the manager. He told me that I was chosen to serve in the chamber for a special event. I couldn't refuse. Working at Bojangles was my livelihood, and the tips from the chamber were rumored to be substantial. So, with a heavy heart and a sense of foreboding, I donned my best uniform and made my way to the restaurant. As I entered the restaurant, I could feel the tension in the air. The other staff members avoided eye contact, and the low hum of conversation seemed hushed and strained. The atmosphere was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I was greeted by Mr. Blackwood, the restaurant's enigmatic owner, a man with a reputation for being both ruthless and eccentric. He led me to the chamber, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, even though we were indoors. The 13 chairs were already occupied, and their occupants sat in eerie silence. The guests were a strange assortment. There was a woman in a long, flowing gown who stared vacantly at her plate, a man with a scarred face who never spoke, and a frail old man with a twisted smile that sent shivers down my spine. They all seemed to be lost in their own world, as if disconnected from reality. As I began to serve the first course, I couldn't help but notice that the conversations at the table were disjointed and surreal. They spoke of dreams and nightmares, of things that should never have been. It was as if the very air in the chamber was tainted with madness. As the night wore on, the sense of dread in the chamber deepened. The guests grew more animated, their voices rising in pitch and intensity. They argued and shouted, their faces contorted with anger and fear. I tried to keep my composure, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Then Mr. Blackwood rose from his seat, his sunglasses never leaving his eyes. He declared that it was time for the main course, a dish known only as the Feast of the Damned. As he spoke those words, the lights in the chamber flickered and dimmed, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The main course arrived in a procession of covered platters, each more ominous than the last. As I uncovered the dishes, a sickening stench filled the room. The guests, however, seemed ravenous, their eyes wide with anticipation. I served the first plate, and to my horror, it was not the gourmet delicacy I had expected. It was a putrid, rotting mass of flesh, crawling with maggots and infested with decay. The guests tore into it with their bare hands, smearing their faces with the foulness. I gagged and stumbled back, my mind unable to process what I was witnessing. The room descended into madness. The guests devoured the grotesque feast with a frenzied fervor, their laughter echoing through the chamber like the cackling of demons. I tried to escape, but Mr. Blackwood's cold, gloved hand clamped down on my shoulder, holding me in place. "Join us, dissest," he hissed, voice dripping with malice. "Join us in the feast of the damned." I pushed him away and bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The mirror on the wall began to ripple and distort, and from its depths, grotesque figures emerged, their hands reaching out as if to drag me into the glass. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled terror, I managed to wrench the door open and stumbled out of the chamber. I fled through the restaurant, the echoing screams of the guests and the haunting laughter of Mr. Blackwood following me like a sinister symphony. I burst into the kitchen, where the chefs were preparing the cursed meal, their faces twisted with madness. I made my way to the back door, flung it open, and ran into the freezing night, leaving Bojangles and its horrors behind. To this day, I can't erase the memory of that night from my mind. Bojangles may have appeared to be a prestigious restaurant, but beneath its facade lay a darkness that defied explanation. I never returned, and I never spoke of what I had witnessed. But sometimes, the dead of night, I hear the echoing laughter and the anguished screams of the chamber's guests. And I know that the horrors of Bojangles are not confined to its walls, but have seeped into my soul, forever haunting my dreams.